this is not a lifetime career that we can do, you know. So
It's not.
Welcome to Rock Docs, a podcast about music documentaries. Brought to you by Treble Media, treblezine.com. They, I'm not 100% sure when this episode is coming out, but they recently, as we're recording, had an article about the Talking Heads live in Rome, which is kind of a, I guess, a companion piece of sort to Stopping Making Heads. And
Stop Making Heads.
Stop
Nice.
Making Heads, the famous Talking Sense documentary. Stop Making Sense. And yeah, it's a good article. I will link to it. And it makes me want to watch this. So that's kind of the idea. Anyway, Treble, good folks. Thank you. The other voice you heard was
Andrew Keatts.
Yes, Andrew Keatts, co-host. And for 100th episode spectacular, we of course wanted to do a film we've been teasing for all this time. And who better than the peaceful, easy dude himself? That's what people call you, right, Jake?
Oh, yeah. Every day.
Jake Longstreth, returning champion Jake Longstreth, American painter, musician, broadcaster, man of many
Internet
talents.
radio host.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, say hi, Jake.
Great to be here. First, long time, second time.
Right.
There you go. So I want to tee this up by saying that none of us would be here. I don't mean like alive. I just mean like here today. If it hadn't been for the history of the Eagles, because as I was recalling, Andy and I were hanging out at my house in 2020. And at one point, Andy goes, "Do you ever watch the history of the Eagles?" And then like 5 hours later, our wives are like, "Are you still talking about some Eagles documentary?" And somehow, through a convoluted whatever, that ended up giving us the idea to start a podcast about music documentaries. And now we've done 100 episodes. This is episode 100. And
Huge.
So God knows you can have a terrible idea while you're hanging out with a friend, and then just never give it up.
If just by sheer force of will you just keep doing it, you can be right where you were when you started 3 years earlier.
But you know, whatever. We made some friends along the way, including Jake Longstreth. So there you go. Got something to
Jake,
show for.
So Jake, I know, you know, in various media appearances of yours, I've listened to that you have discussed the history of the Eagles. Maybe you could kick us off with sort of your introduction or your relationship with the movie. We should probably get to your relationship with the band, which I actually
let's start with that.
More interesting. Yeah.
I mean, the movie I think I've seen 3 times now over the last 10 years, and I love it. But yeah, I mean, the Eagles always occupied sort of a mythical place in my inner life for kind of mysterious reasons. I mean, they're just. I love at the beginning of episode 2 of the doc how there's just dash cam footage of people driving around cities and towns all over the world listening to the Eagles. It's like Tokyo, London, some city in America. And that's how I became familiar with the band. I was born in 1977, so I think that's the year Hotel California came out. Maybe that came out in 1976. But and actually in the documentary, Glenn Frey is like, we broke up in 1980. And 1980 is when the classic rock radio format was inaugurated.
Was introduced to the
I just, for me, like the Eagles and Creedence Clearwater are like some of my earliest memories of like responding to music. And it was all in the car, my dad's car. And my dad, he was always like, oh yeah, Eagles. I love the Eagles. Great band. Now he didn't own any Eagles records, and he never would play them in the house because we didn't need to, because we were in the car so much that we would just hear it every day in the car.
That's the funniest part about every person in America owning that greatest hits record is that like you never needed to play Eagles on your own.
Right.
You just wait 12 minutes and the Eagles will be on the radio.
Yep.
Yeah, for a very long time. Well, so you know, the elephant in the room, the Eagles are a much maligned band, you know, even by critics in the 70s. And then, you know, sort of, I think a formative moment in understanding the Eagles is the film The Big Lebowski, which I know for people of my age cohort, they walked into seeing that movie with no opinion on the Eagles and walked out hating the Eagles because of the one line that Jeffrey Lebowski says in that movie. I'm nearly certain that every 40-year-old person felt forced from high school through, whenever they were bold enough to have their own opinions, that you just had to hate the Eagles. So what was in the 90s when you guys were growing up, before that movie came out, was it frowned upon to be somebody who liked the Eagles?
Oh yeah, but yes, I went to college in Portland, Oregon at Lewis and Clark College between 95 and 99. And so both the Eagles and the Grateful Dead were not cool at the late 90s, early 2000s, particularly in the indie rock circles that I was running in. But I wore it proudly. I actually remember walking to a record store near my house in Portland and buying a used CD of the Eagles' Their Greatest Hits in like 1999 because I was like, I want to kind of reconnect with this, and just playing it all the time. And I remember like having some like house party with just like there were the bands playing, and then like we were kind of like throwing on records and just like a hectic kind of like house party that you have in your 20s. I remember throwing on Victim of Love. And I was like, because I was just like, this song is amazing. Like, just like, pow, pow. Just like those like huge power chords at the beginning. And I remember just like my roommates like looking at me like, bro, you are just like killing the vibe right now. So I just
like after Master P was playing or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or just, it's getting hot in here. Or just whatever. Like,
and just getting real like DJ about it, be like, no, this fits like within like the right context. this is kind of a club banger.
Yeah, man. Victim of Love goes hard. I don't know. I always just like I always loved the Dead and always loved the Eagles.
Yeah.
So
now the Eagles have not had the like critical reclamation that Steely Dan and Grateful Dead have had. That is like,
I don't think they will.
Like that it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe when they debut at the Sphere, maybe that'll be the impetus.
That's all it takes.
Yeah. Or at this point, the Sphere might be something that like sends you down into like uncool and an uncool valley.
Exactly. People used to like fish, and then
yeah.
All right. So, I do want to say that Jake alluded to the two parts. This is a 2-part doc from 2013, directed by Alison Eastwood, and so
Ellwood,
the thing about this one
isn't it?
Alison Ellwood.
What did I say? Alison Eastwood. God, I'm really nailing it with my professional broadcasting career today. So, oh gosh. So yeah. So
a master, we should say.
So the thing about this is that
master
like
of the form.
A lot of these classic rock docs will like go up to the point where like they become really famous and they have all their hits, and then it like just kind of ignores or does a little speed run through the like, later part of the career. This one does the twist on that where like the first part ends in 1980 when the band breaks up, and then the second part, aka the good part for the heads, it covers their broken up period in the 80s and then their reunion and cruising right on, through the 90s and 2000s. I mean, it doesn't go into great detail about a lot of that, but you do get a lot of a late period Eagles stuff, which is just really something. So I don't know if we should tackle the 2 parts separately or if we just kind of roll through it. I mean, I don't even know how to approach this masterpiece.
Yeah. I mean, if we go chronologically through the whole thing, this will be a 4-hour episode
at least. Yeah.
But I will say that is like a master stroke for how you deal with this. It's just like, just roll credits in the middle and then and then pick it right back up as if it's a sweet sequel has started.
Yeah. The normies just want to end at, when they break up and the 70s hits. They've heard all the hits. They've seen them perform live. They look young and cool and sexy, and they got some sex, drugs, and rock and roll stories, and they got their money's worth. And the weirdos who want to get into the real rock doc stuff are they get a whole another hour of goodies.
Yeah, that's right.
It ends with Senator Alan Cranston who you know when you're watching talks and it sends you down these wikis rabbit holes, and I was like, I've never heard of Senator Alan Cranston. Dude was senator from California from 69 to 93. 4-term senator from California. Never heard of him. It kind of like makes you think. It's just sort of like once you're off the political stage, it's like, when was the last time you thought about Paul Ryan or whatever? It's just kind of fascinating that like Don and Glenn were so fired up to like do this fundraiser for Alan Cranston down in Long Beach. That ended up being their last show, July 31st, 1980. The final Eagles show was a fundraiser for Senator Alan Cranston. And I love Don Felder's vibe. He's just like, I'm not political. Yeah, I don't know who this guy is. I could care less.
And like,
why are we not getting paid for this game?
Right.
And I love that, like, that 30 years later, he's had all the time in the world to be like, to come up with some alternative explanation. Well, I cared, but like, I know that the system is broken, some sort of highfalutin idea about, no. He's just still like, I don't know, man. I just didn't understand why we were supporting this guy. I didn't follow politics.
I love the honesty. Great. Yeah, I mean, Don Felder and Randy Meisner and Timothy B. Schmidt like are extremely dumb. They're very sweet. They remind me of Kirk Hammett in Some Kind of Monster. Yeah. Like you need this
perfect example.
The sweet guy who's a pushover, who's like so skilled and incredible, but just like I mean,
the way. The magic of this is that Don Henley appears to be smart next to these guys.
Well, yeah. I mean, Meisner...
like, by the standards of those guys, Don Henley is a genius, and he's convinced himself that that's true, even though everything he says in this documentary is the dumbest thing you ever heard.
You think
it's very similar to the Felder thing.
I think so. It's a lot of like...
You think Henley?
Henley is like... This is like Henley in the documentary. He'll like look dead into the lens and say... there's a fine line between the American dream and the American nightmare.
Yeah, that.
And then he'll just lean back in his chair like, man, I just gave you like you should just write that on the dollar bill.
Truth
like,
bomb.
That's good.
He's got a lot of what he thinks are well honed metaphors. Like when he's describing their reunion, and he's like, people don't like rust, but I've got an old 50s car that's covered in rust and it runs like a top.
Yeah,
it runs like a top.
Yeah, no, he's definitely like a blowhard. There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I think of him as like I think his lyrics are. I mean, I think he's a smart guy in the sense that he's a good lyric writer, and he's clearly like a very canny operator.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, blowhard. I mean, this is what makes me think that the Eagles won't ever have that critical reevaluation, because Don Henley and Glenn Frey are so insufferable and annoying as guys. Like Jerry Garcia, how can you not love that guy?
Sure.
And then the guys in Steely Dan are like weird, kind of mercurial, guys,
outsiders.
Yeah, always wearing shades and stuff, and Glenn Frey and Don Henley are so full of themselves that
they're full of themselves, and they make no attempt to hide the fact that they were going for like commercial success at all times. And like, it's not that they didn't care about the artistic side of it. Like they saw themselves as artists and songwriters, but they're so cravenly commercial at all times and so focused on that. And maybe every,
that, dude.
Okay.
Finish the thought.
Well, I mean, like Mick Jagger's that way too, but he started out as like this sexy rebel. So he kind of can coast off of that a little bit. And he kind of seems to understand the joke. You know what I mean? Like he can make fun of himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got a sense of humor.
See how ridiculous he is. But I don't think Don Henley has the capacity to make fun of himself or to see the humor or the silliness.
There was that scene in part 2 during the reunion when they're playing the new song and he forgets the lyrics.
Yeah.
And you could.
That's the most human moment.
And they were so tightly wound, and then he forgets the lyrics and they start laughing. And I mean, if they were truly cravenly commercial, it would be more like Kiss, where they went to like the lowest common denominator. I mean, if you look at their albums, like the albums do change from album to album. I mean, they start off with that sort of like country rock thing that was emerging out of like the Burrito Brothers or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, you know, by the end of the decade, it's like Hotel California, which is like, I don't know, like that's a big swing.
Sure.
I mean, that's like an 8-minute single
Yeah.
with these like wild solos at the end and like this like pretty like trippy, abstract, lyrical thing he's doing that in that song. I mean, that song doesn't scream like huge hit single. So I think they have like
I mean, even a 7-minute song. Yeah.
I think they have like a lot of artistic integrity. I think
you can have artistic integrity and try to be super commercial. I mean, I don't know, Michael Jackson, whoever, you know what I mean? Like you can, there's a lot of people that are very successful artists that are still, you know, as commercial as can be that, you know, you can name, and the Beatles are certainly up there, whatever, you know, like it's not like the Beatles hid the fact that they're looking for a hit, you know, they weren't trying to play that off, and just be like,
right.
what, this one went number one? You gotta be kidding me.
Right,
Like,
right.
But somehow the Don and Glenn, just the way they present themselves, you can dig into the catalog and have a different impression of it. But just, you know, if you're just cruising through the channels and you see an interview with one of these guys, especially Don, like Don thinks of himself, seems to think of himself as like the modern day Thoreau, you know, like he really identifies with that. And, you know, he is trying to present himself that way, at least, you know, from when I came to know him in like the late 80s and, you know, when he, you know, was so popular. Um, and it, you know, he carries himself with a way that you just don't get a lot of like, this guy seems like actually probably a cool hang, you know, but most rock stars at least try to put that across.
I don't think Henley would be a cool hang. I do think Glenn would be a cool hang.
Yeah.
I think it would be fun to hang out with Glenn Frey. I don't know how much fun I would have hanging with Don Henley, but I think it's mostly, I just think he's like pretty self-serious. I mean, like even right down to when they release Long Road Out of Eden and they have an exclusive deal with Walmart, and he has to hasten to add that he was okay with it because they were becoming much more green as a company. It's like,
that's amazing.
Yeah, Walmart was really changing their ways back in.
Plus, they were selling it for 12 bucks. It's a double album selling for $12.
Yeah,
not gouging the fans.
Twice as much. Yeah,
right. I mean, they do. You know, part of it. This is how critics were writing about them in the 70s, was that they were the commercial manifestation of that Flying Burrito Brothers Poco thing. So, you know, it's hard to shake that, you know, 30 years of narrative building. And
I guess to me, it's sort of like that people, like the critics hated Led Zeppelin at the time too. And it's like, when I think of the like the Beatles are like the quintessential 1960s band. You know, they emerged in the early mid 60s and they break up in 1970. And then Zeppelin emerges in the late 60s. Eagles start in like 71, 72. And then both the Eagles and Zeppelin end in like 80. And like, I love how like compact the Eagles' career was. It was just the 1970s. And yeah, for some reason I put like maybe it's that classic rock radio format that we all grew up with. The Eagles and Zeppelin are like, to me, are the true 70s bands.
Yeah. I mean, I do think when people say like, what is classic rock? I kind of think you're talking about the Eagles probably, like most of the time.
And I guess,
I mean, like, I think that because of like, there was such a fixture of classic rock radio that I do think that's what you mostly mean.
But the Eagles were kind of the softer, like if you're listening to classic rock radio in, you know, 1992, like, you know, you might get a kick-ass Zeppelin song. Not that they didn't have their ballads, but you know, like you get been a long time since I rock and rolled, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's like Desperado. That's a come down, you know?
I guess
it's like Zeppelin.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, like, when, you know, at that time in 92 or a few years later, like Zeppelin was cool. Like you wouldn't exclusively hear them on classic rock radio.
Right.
Like the metal kids.
Yeah. The older kids who smoke cigarettes.
The older kids. that smoked cigarettes. Kids who were good at guitar, like Zeppelin.
Yes.
Where like the Eagles was the exclusive purview of classic rock radio. That was like 100% of my exposure to it was on that radio format.
The thing I find is if somebody says they hate the Eagles,
Yeah.
everybody that I've ever met,
Yeah.
if you're like, but Joe Walsh, they'll be like, yeah, okay, well, he's cool.
Well,
He
Joe
gets
Walsh,
passed.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And in this documentary, Joe Walsh really, really brings it. I mean, he's my MVP of this documentary. He is absolutely.
There's a lot of competition.
Every
There's a lot
time
of competition.
He lights up the screen every time he comes on.
Mm-hmm.
He's being real with you.
Yep.
He gets emotional. He tells funny drug and partying stories. He rips on the guitar. What else could you? He's wearing the most ridiculous clothes.
The Marvin the Martian
he's also
t-shirt.
being really the Marvin the Martian t-shirt, the Zubaz pants, whatever.
Zubaz pants,
incredible at all times. He's down for a good time, but yet he also like gets real into the drinking and all, and just like how like he really could have died, and this kind of saved his life. Like
it gets heavy.
Real straightforward about it. He gets heavy
in a way you don't expect. Recovery arc in part 2 is like arc in part 2 is very touching. It's really a touching and well done piece. I mean, the whole movie, like, there's a lot of funny stuff that I just like to quote from this movie. As like, might as well be scenes from like Billy Madison to me that I've like said them so many times. But truly the craft that went into this movie is incredible. It's as unironically as good a music documentary as I think there is. I think Ellwood is great at this. I mean, there's like so many like even like little things that you only pick up on repeat viewings where like they're just trying to situate the band in the Southern California country rock format. And JD Souther says, we were all interested in this stuff that was coming on right now that at that time with the Byrds and Dillard and Clark and the Burrito Brothers. And he trails off. It would be very easy to edit the clip right there. You don't need to include Poco, but they let Souther finish the quote and say Poco. And then we clip over to Timothy B. Schmidt, unremarked upon.
Yeah.
That we're introducing a future member of the Eagles, and we just get what's Poco? Like, if most people don't know who Timothy B. Schmidt is. If you're watching this movie the first time, don't know who Timothy B. Schmidt is, don't know who Poco is. You think you're just getting, here's the milieu of bands they're growing out of. Here's a couple seconds of this band Poco I'm hearing about for the first time. But actually, that's your introduction to a future member of the band that pays off like an hour later. It's just like really good filmmaking. And there's moments like that all throughout this thing.
No doubt. Partly the reason why, they spent so much time on this thing, and you get everybody, like everybody who interacted with the Eagles who's like alive to tell the story is in this documentary. Linda Ronstadt, Bob Seger talking about early days in Detroit with Glenn Frey, Kenny Rogers talking about early days in Texas, meeting Don Henley. And a lot of Jackson Brown and everybody and the managers and the
Johns.
David Geffen,
Glenn Johns, David Geffen, everybody. And I think that's because this was an Irving Azoff production. So he's the famous like cutthroat stab your mother for a nickel manager of the Eagles to this day, as far as I know. And
no, he is.
And he's like the Sphere guy, and he's still at it. Like
he put Dead and Company together.
Of all the Titanic managers from the 70s.
I think he's
probably got to be the only one who's He's got to be the only one who's still at it and on top of his game.
I heard that, I think he was involved. Did you see that John Mayer has a 51% stake in the Grateful or Dead & Co. brand?
Yeah.
And I think that's an Azoff joint.
It's an Azoff
brokering that.
It's oft said within the Dead world. I don't know how true this is that like Mayer and Weir met in a boardroom put together by Azoff. And it was like literally like all right, we've got a
merger and acquisition.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a merger and acquisition.
It's inspiring stuff.
Yeah, I will watch that rock doc if the footage exists. I would love to see it.
But yeah, apparently Azov, I read an interview. He went to Don and Glenn and said, "Let's make this movie." They were on board.
It is an
They said, "Well,
authorized
who should we
film.
get to do it?" It's an
Oh yeah.
authorized film. Yeah, they went to Don and Glenn, said, "Who should we get to do it?" Azov gave them like, they didn't name names, but they said the 5 best music documentaries recently to choose from. And Don said, "I don't like any of these. Who's the best just straight documentary maker?" And Azov said, "Well, Alex Gibney."
Yeah.
And so they went to Gibney, and Gibney said, "Well, I'm a little bit busy right now, but I'm happy to produce it. But we could have, my partner Ellwood would be happy to direct it." So they went on board with that. And then she said, "Just so you know, like, we have to do this, warts and all. It's like, if we pull any punches, it's not worth doing." And she says, to their credit, they were all in on it. So
Yeah.
Don Felder says that it hides the ball quite a bit, though.
Well, what does he say about it?
He says that Glenn and Don also hated each other, and that the movie chooses to portray it as like they were a unified force against the other guys, but they also hated each other all throughout the 70s.
Isn't that a little subtext? I mean, don't you
Yeah,
make that up?
I kind of don't get the sense that any of these people got along with anyone in their lives at any point, basically.
Yeah, like Don and Glenn seem like a corporate unit. They don't seem like, we're best buds, They just, I mean, maybe in the early days when
Maybe
they
in
were
the
like
early days, yeah.
roommates and whatever, when, they were scraping a buck together, but I just don't get the sense that they come off, it really is like a a business relationship that, is fun. Like they don't have to be best friends. They can go home after the
Yeah.
tour and not talk, and it's not a problem because that's not their job. Their job is to produce Eagles quality productions and records and tour and have that be up to everybody's standards. And they don't seem, at some point they came to an understanding. That's just I'm just reading between the lines, and that's what it is. And that also, like, I think goes to the Eagles vibe of like they're not all pretending to be buddies like every band does. I don't know. Maybe again I'm just reading too deeply into this.
Yeah. I mean, what I would just say is like it's not like they all come off looking great. So, if the idea was to withhold information to make everybody look good, it fails in that because they don't look good.
I mean, it's funny. Like, I don't know. I watch this. Yeah, because like the popular conception of this doc is like, oh my god, what a bunch of assholes these guys are. Honestly, when I watched it the last couple of nights, I was like, I felt nothing but sympathy and love for these guys. I love their music. I just like was like this. I mean, sure, they have some sort of like semi-rehearsed canned lines. I'm sure the director was like, say that again about the rust on your 1955 Ford, but like,
yeah. The one real
I have
line,
like,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to jump in real quick and say that the one canned line that I've only picked up on this on the 12 times I've watched it. But I think often you'll hear people talk about this scene. Maybe the best scene in the movie is Glenn describing Jackson Browne writing "Dr. My Eyes."
Mm-hmm.
It's like perfectly done, perfect anecdote, perfect execution. It's great. But when Jackson sets it up, he describes everything that was in his apartment, and he finishes with that he had a teapot in there.
Mm-hmm.
Which becomes the rejoinder to the story later on when Glenn says, and then I would hear the teapot go off and then he'd start writing again. I feel pretty confident that she had the Glenn part and she came to Jackson and said, describe your apartment. Make sure to mention that there's a teapot there. Because I just don't know
Sure. I mean,
that he's going to describe this apartment that he lived in.
And said, like, I had a bed, a piano, and a teapot.
And a teapot. Like, I don't know that the teapot makes the description if you're not trying to deliver that, that punchline to the story that's coming.
But
that's my
professional
conspiracy
documentary.
That's professional documentary. I'm good with it. Don't get me wrong. I'm okay with it. In fact, I think this is good.
I forget where I heard this, but like, in Grizzly Man, when Werner Herzog is listening to the audio of Timothy Treadwell getting killed by the bear, someone told me that that was just completely a performance.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would seem very Herzog.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me that Werner Herzog would just completely like fabricate that.
Totally.
Point
Yeah,
is,
he would do that.
Point is, all of these
Listen,
you're gonna have a strong.
if you're doing
you're
doing a documentary about a rock band,
Yeah.
and if your journalistic integrity is such that like you can't feed Jackson Browne a line to tie an anecdote together.
Totally.
Nobody's expecting that standard here. This is not, like we're not interviewing the Vladimir Zelensky or whatever.
I did hear
it's just not.
I listened to an interview with the director. She said that Don was upset at one point that when they show the satellite to say that or the space station that they played the Eagles at the space station. It was very important to Don that the song they actually played at the space station was Hotel California, which is not what she plays in the movie. And she was just like, "It's fine. Like it works better this way. It's on the same album. Like forget."
What did they play in the doc? Do you remember?
It's
Hi there. How are you?
Yeah, that's it. Joe Walsh singing.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's it.
It did weird me out. I'm like, why are they playing?
I listened
of all the Eagles songs.
You're asleep in the space station, and all of a sudden you're hi there. How are you? Like, I feel like that would be a little shock to the system.
Dude,
you gotta ease into that day on the space
station. That footage in part 2 when Joe Walsh is Joe Walsh is singing "Pretty Maids All in a Row." Moving. That song. I listened to that song 3 times today. That song is incredible.
It's really good, and I mean, it's so vulnerable. Him, he's sober at that point.
It's been a long time. Dum 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 dum.
It's they talk about like Joe bringing the vocal quality down a little bit, and they're willing to live with it because of everything else he brings. And it's like, I love his voice.
I mean,
I get that, and it works in the blend. I mean, whatever.
I was surprised by that. Yeah, because there's that whole drama when they're making Hotel California, and Don Felder wants to sing "Victim of Love," and Don Henley's just sort of like not up to band standards. Don had that low monotone
like 20 times.
Yeah, he's like, and then they went to lunch, and then Don went in there and did the vocals to "Victim of," But I love Don just being like, it's not up to band standards. I guess here's the thing, like people like hate on Don. What I like about Don is like he is a bit of a straight shooter of just sort of like, listen, me and Glenn are the leaders. Like I know that people have this like idealistic vision of rock bands being some sort of democracy, but like no, like there's got to be a quarterback, like someone's got to take charge here. Me and Glenn write the songs. I'm an awesome singer.
Song power.
Yeah, song power. I like that phrase.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I mean, you guys have been in bands, but like, so you would know better than me. But every band I've ever known anyone in, from a friend rock band all the way up to a real band, has like 1 or 2 guys that do like 85% of the stuff besides play the music.
That's being generous.
Yeah. So like, I don't know. I mean, like, who are they kidding? Were Don Felder and Randy Meisner going to run this band? If given the opportunity.
But the flip side of that's amazing about, because I was bouncing around Hotel California today, and I was like, man, like there's like 4 different lead vocals on that record. It's like Henley singing Hotel California and Glenn Frey singing "Life in New Kid in Town," and then Joe Walsh writes the riff for "Life in the Fast Lane," and they kind of like that seems like a co-write, and then like Randy Meisner sings
follow-up album.
Try and Love Again.
Follow-up album Timothy B. Schmitz gets.
It's kind of, I mean, for all this, I mean, there's a lot in there about Henley being like, we're the leaders, but also it's like it kind of was like a very collaborative. It was a real band. There was a real chemistry, the vocal blend, the way the guitar players interacted and played together. Like they're really, I mean, compared to like, I don't know, a lot of other bands, like the Eagles were truly like a very collaborative band. And they talked about that a lot, like the chemistry of the band. And it's, again, it is like, it's easy to dismiss that as like, oh, these guys are just like, They just sanded off all the edges on like the cool '60s Laurel Canyon stuff. These were these like AM radio 1970s sellouts, but like they did have a very refined aesthetic that like is pretty subtle, but like and for that reason it's easy to overlook.
Yeah.
And sorry.
Well, they also just have so many songs. They have just so many good songs.
And I just want to finish. Wait, so like, I guess the thing that like, as I revisited the Eagles in my early 20s after I bought that Greatest Hits CD was like, oh, like there is this like it has that like sheen of like easy listening, breezy 70s music, but there is like when you like really listen to it, you're like, oh, there's like some cool, weird storytelling and themes and lyrics and guitar playing in these. Like it's sneaky. I think I don't know. That's what I like. That's what I kind of like ended up really responding to. Like the lyrics to Hotel California are incredible. I don't care, and I love how like in the doc. I love how in the doc, Don. This was a line that I really liked of all the canned Don Henley lines. He's talking about how everyone interprets that, and they put all this metaphorical weight on it, and he's not dismissing that, but he's like, Hotel California is about a journey from innocence to experience. I love that. That was not like he could have been like, oh, it's a metaphor about like the corruption of the American dream and how California was once this like open land of possibility, and now it's this like kind of suburban wasteland, or you know how people like interpret Hotel California. And I liked how he just like kept it open, but also like he wasn't just about to say like, oh, it's just like nonsense. He was like, I love that. I think that was such a great, succinct way to put it.
This is my thing about Henley
in
his songwriting is he has a theme. Hotel California is sort of in some sense the apex or whatever. But then 10 years later, he writes the line, out on the road today, I saw a Deadhead sticker on a Cadillac. And that was like
incredible.
He finally reduced it.
Yeah.
He finally reduced the theme that he spent and whole albums writing into one line. And then he was done. Meaning, amazingly, the Eagles reform and have been together, whatever, for all these years now, right when this songwriter fell off the cliff never to return. Because he had done his thing. You know what I mean? Like he finally he had one idea and he boiled it down to like the one line, like the least number of words. You know, he's like some great Japanese, whatever artisan who finally at some age, like achieves this level to do something with one brushstroke. And then there's nothing left to achieve in a way. That's my feeling about that guy. And now he's just been like, well, I kind of did it. I don't know. You know, he still tries to write a song once in a while, but he's done it.
Yeah, but I mean, is that a dig on him? I mean, I think that's like
it's not a dig, or it's just an observation.
I like what you said. I agree. He is like the master artisan that was able to distill it down to the most simple image. I would say that he did write some great songs after that. Boys of Summer was like 84. His late 80s, End of the Innocence, and Heart of the Matter. I think those are great songs.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I like Heart of the Matter a lot.
I love those songs.
When they play it,
fair enough. I might not be getting the chronology exactly right, but the theory, is strong enough to to carry.
Well, like, I mean, it's like I'm not gonna like. I mean, now they've been playing like on the Greatest Hits. They've been playing their old songs for all these years, and that's fine. I mean, that's just like the Stones and Paul McCartney. It's the same. It's not that different, really. I mean,
yeah, it is funny. It is funny in like '94 when they get together and there's the press conference. The press conference is so good. I love that.
It's amazing.
And first
of all, more press conferences for bands.
When was the last time a band did a press conference?
Yeah.
Like it's been forever. Probably like this century. Not one band has done a press conference other than like maybe BTS or something. But I mean, a rock band, whatever. Like those days. This may have been the last ever press conference by a rock band. And boy, I miss those days. But anyway, at one point in the press conference, he says, he's talking about working on some new songs. And he's like, well, we can't just keep recycling this material. And it's like 30 years later. In fact, they can. And they still do. Glenn's long dead. It doesn't.
Well, I mean, it's like, I mean, it's like I think intentionally they used Don in the very beginning and that awesome backstage footage that we start the movie with
Incredible.
when he says, I mean, the first like 15 minutes of this movie are
I wanted to
like,
bring that up.
you could honestly, yeah, you could cut it right before Glenn says we might as well start at the beginning and he throws it back to Motown. If like everything before, I mean, that's, which is also incredible and we should get to, but that first like period before that is perfect.
There
Everything.
are stars in the
Oh,
Yeah.
southern sky. It just opens on them doing
Yeah. Seven
4-part
Bridges Road. It's like
harmony
nailing it.
backstage warming up.
and it's so good and I don't know if she felt this way. I know I listened to her. She said she always was a Eagles fan.
Mhm.
She always respected them greatly. She was, didn't come in here like either ambivalent or as a critic. But so I don't know if this was intentional, but it's such a disarming moment for any of the people who come in with the Lebowski pilled perspective that the Eagles aren't good. You hear that and you're like, there is something here. Like no matter what I think about most of this catalog, I have to admit this 4-part harmony right here backstage is undeniable. And it's a really smart way to start it. And what I picked up this time was the first time is like we start our movie with the very thing that Glenn Johns says
Good point.
is the thing that unlocked the Eagles for him. That like he says he sees them live and he's like, I don't really get it. They fly him out to Aspen. He looks again. He's like, I still don't really get it. Right before they break, they do a little harmony just like this. And he's like, oh, these guys it's a vocal band. Now I get it. And it changes everything. Well, that's what we get to start with.
Yeah.
We get to start with, oh, they're a vocal band.
All right, I want to get off on this a little bit because
Mhm.
this
What,
is
are you
something
gonna
I've
tell
been
me you
thinking
don't
about.
like that section?
No, I love
Okay.
it. No, I'm
Okay.
taking a tangent off of something you just said. So
Mhm.
the term they use a lot is a vocal group,
Yeah.
and that is a little bit different from a rock band, right? So like when the Beatles first came out, they were marketed as a vocal group, right? A pop vocal, you know, like the Beach Boys or whatever, Motown type groups and things like that were popular at the time. Dion,
Yep.
like the Four Seasons, right? That's what was happening, and they were seen as a vocal group. Now they wrote their own songs and they played their instruments, and that's kind of had a novelty about some of it. And then they evolve into like creating the concept of a rock band that didn't exist before, right? And it, and the Eagles come out of this. There, it's sort of like they never got off of the vocal group concept. They never left that, and it was still existing when they were getting together. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, clearly a vocal group, right? I mean, they're a rock band, but the harmonies and the vocals are part of it, and it did kind of make me feel like something was lost when that was abandoned. Meaning, there are rock bands that harmonize and have great harmonies. I mean,
Goose.
to this day, sure. Right, to this day, I've your brother's in one of them, Jake. I mean, like that's obviously a thing that still exists, but nobody who's in high school or college or whatever in their 20s and they want to put a band together these days, and it's even if they listen to the Eagles and they like that kind of music, they're not going to say, hey guys, hey folks, I'm putting together a vocal group, right? That terminology is gone.
Sure.
The only word we have is rock band, and then there's subgenres and things, but it is kind of a bummer that somewhere along the line, the Eagles were maybe the last of these groups that came out that were really saw themselves in that history and that legacy, and uh you know rocking out became more the thing, and I don't know,
Hmm.
it did kind of make me miss like an alternate history where you had both of those lanes going separately.
Yeah. That's cool. And it's
Yeah.
cool. And because a lot of it, so much of the movie is people who were like in the trenches with them the whole time. And, like even when we get to the wrap up at the end, I can't remember. I think it might be Jack Tempchin who's just talking about what he loves about him. And he's like, when it's all of them on stage and they're harmonizing together, like nothing is better than that. Like when they are singing together, all of them at the same time, like that is when it's all unlocked. And it does seem like all the people who were there for them, who were part of their story, recognized from the beginning that that's what it was about. Even when they, Bernie leaves and Joe Walsh comes in and they, get these dueling guitar solos and stuff. It, it never lost that was the core of what they were.
Yeah. You're right. They never lost that. I did sort of like, I was sad to see Bernie go because I loved that. He was, he had a direct connection to like the Burrito Brothers and like Gene Clark and all that stuff. But, and he was like a country player. And then Glenn was like, no, man, I'm like a boogie guitar player, man. Let's do Chuck Berry songs and stuff. And, but you're right. I'm glad that they were able to maintain that vocal sound. Yeah, just to back up to Glenn Johns again, like it really, I'm like, that's what like, maybe it was really obvious, but that's what like a great producer does. Like he like, I love it. I just love to picture Glenn Johns like this, like kind of like proper, erudite, like British guy who had worked with like the Beatles, the Who, and Led Zeppelin,
the Stones, and
he worked with Stones. Yeah. And like, yeah, and this, seeing like Keith Moon and like John Bonham and stuff, and then Don Henley like is an awesome drummer, but he's not like a powerful rock drummer like the way those guys are. He's like, he's such like he's not even as powerful as Ringo could be. Like I guess he's more of a Charlie Watts guy, like chill and like really serves the song
in the pocket.
Yeah, and like really like subtle fill work but anyway, I just love to think about the Eagles and like all of their like youthful arrogance. These guys are all in like their early 20s being like, we're the next thing. And like, I love that they just like had no material and they like waltz into like David Geffen's office and they're like, are you signing us or what? Now, granted, like David Geffen was about their age. It's like, they knew him, but like they did seem to have this like real sense of like destiny to them. And so then they go to Glenn Johns, who's worked with like the best bands ever. And they're like, yeah, we're the Eagles. We're from LA. Like we're going to be the next thing. And him just being like, you guys suck. I'm sorry. You're like, you guys like are not a good rock band. It's very canned, like boogie stuff, And then like he hears the vote. I just love that. What an amazing image of him just being like, oh, yeah, you guys focus on the singing.
Yeah,
drill down
you
there.
Guys can sing.
Drill down on the singing, guys.
Well, and especially because he's enthusiastic about it once he hears it. It's not just like, oh, okay, that's a thing you can.
And I love that they
it's
like
he's like that.
I love that they recorded their first like 2 or 3 albums in London, like because I remember like just to go back to the beginning of the episode, like hearing this music in the car, even though it was like the mid 80s, it evoked the 70s so powerfully, even though it was only 10 years old at most, a lot of this music. And like, and there's a moment where Joe Walsh is like, I think that we like at our best represented our time. Like people talk about the Roaring 20s. I feel like we represented the 1970s, like so we encapsulated it so perfectly. And like, even in like 1984, driving around in the car with my dad, like I like felt, even though the 70s weren't that long ago, it did feel like this like hazy, far away time. And and it's something about hearing Peaceful Easy Feeling in like 1984. I was like, what is this? And I was living in Connecticut, and I was like, I would visit my grandparents in Southern California, and so I was aware of that. But I was like, it was so like, this is so funny to say this about the Eagles. The early those early 70s Eagles recordings were like so like exotic to my little brain at the time. Anyway, just to return to the Glenn Johns thing, like to picture all this music that evokes so powerfully California 1970s, that was recorded in London with those like silly like red double-decker buses going around. It's just like I was like picturing them in London, like, and I get a peaceful, easy feeling, and then just like wrapping up for the day and like going out to the pub, having a pint and like hitting some bangers and mash or whatever. I was just like, Something
Such a
about
lo-
that was so
yeah.
funny, like so weird. And then the fact that they did the first 2 or 3 albums there, like the second album is Desperado, which is they doing those the goofy 19th century cowboy mythology. I mean, the photo shoot was obviously like at Paramount Ranch or whatever in SoCal, but like they recorded that album again with Glyn Johns, and I think On the Border too was recorded with Glyn Johns.
It's not.
It's
It's not totally clear. The timeline gets a little messy there. They're like when we're on the border. We get to the Glenn Johns Bill Simzik handoff,
I think that's
and it's unclear
I
exactly
think
when that happened.
Simzik did One of These Nights.
Okay, not the one sung by those German concert goers who are the most German looking people
Amazing.
in that I've ever seen.
Amazing.
Yeah, what a song to try to. They just don't seem like they've had any crazy nights.
Yeah,
when you see those folks. I do want to talk about the photo shoots because the, they this movie for whatever reason takes a lot of time going. Like we speak to both of the photographers that were involved in the
yeah.
photo shoot
Oh
for the
yeah.
first album, and like it's the
They're like part of the movie for the first 40 minutes. They're
yeah.
like they might as well be in the Eagles.
Yeah,
Totally.
it's like they really spend a lot of time on those photo shoots, and I never quite understand why that is in the movie. Like, it's fine, but it doesn't like.
Well, it's
And then like
it,
the rest of their career, they don't discuss like
Hotel
the
California.
Hotel
Any other
California
album
album
covers.
cover. Like
Yeah.
it's not like they're okay. We're gonna make sure their visuals were very important to them, so we're gonna like no. It's just like for whatever reason, we really want to understand about them getting high and like on peyote and like hiking and the sun coming up and them taking that photo. Like I don't, and there was an eagle there. I don't know. It's a little.
I mean,
I
I
don't
do
get it.
think that that's a really iconic album cover, and
Sure.
like a classic California sunset to me, like looks like that album cover. Like I think so. I think about it a lot. Like when I'm walking my dog, I'll be like, "God, there we go, the Eagles album cover." So I kind of get it. Also, um, the director, seems to be fond of and friends with Harry Diltz, the photographer. She made a 2-part documentary, Laurel Canyon, and there's like no talking heads in it at all. But Harry Diltz is like sort of like the narrator, basically. He like carries us through the whole thing.
You were really pulling some threads here, Andy.
Yeah, I
You're
did.
doing some investigative journalism here.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think it's a
Also,
good
like
story. I mean, I think like
I think they like
them
the
meeting
story,
them,
right?
like
Yeah.
them. The plan was to meet at the Troubadour and leave when it closed at 2 a.m. It's like some classic guys
Yeah.
in their 20s doing like dumb shit,
Guys in their 20s.
like let's drunk drive out to
sure.
out to Joshua Tree and get there at 4:30 in the morning, and then take peyote and then like do a photo shoot at dawn. I mean, is that like not the most 1971 story you've ever heard?
Yeah. And also for their scene, like it's like we start at the Troubadour where it all started.
Right.
We go out to Joshua Tree with like all the Graham Parsons lore,
Right.
Like there's you really get the Southern California sound, the LA
I gotta
sound
say
in there.
one thing. I mean, I touched on this earlier with like them having a sense of predestiny, that they knew they were gonna. I mean, they say like never in our wildest dreams, and I get that they are like literally one of the biggest bands ever, but like they did seem like to know that they were gonna like kick some butt. But like, and I was like, I wonder if that factored into like how much they filmed themselves, because like, how is there this much footage? Like, even there's footage of them in Aspen, like when they had no songs, and they're like somehow they get Glyn Johns out there, who's one of the biggest producers, with no songs, and there's footage of them, black and white, like 8mm footage or something, of them just like playing these like cruddy rock songs,
doing like a freak out in some like it looks like a
there's
basement
just like
in a bar,
so much wild footage where you're just like, and then you're kind of lulled into it because you're watching the documentary, but then you're like, wait, why did they film this? There's so much like early stuff of like
sync sound and
what's that?
The crew
with like sync sound.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's not
totally.
even just like an 8mm. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
it's not
Super
silent.
8
Yeah,
camera
yeah.
with no sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The crew found for this movie. The crew found the all the footage of them with Linda Ronstadt. No one involved in the band had any idea that footage exists.
Well, that makes a little more sense because Linda
and
Ronstadt
they
was a big star, and they were backing her
Yeah.
up, and it makes sense that, like, oh, they're playing like a little club gig with Linda Ronstadt. There happens to be footage of that. But there's a lot of
like,
footage of
we're on
them
the way
of
up.
just
Yeah.
like the band, just like
in a
Yeah.
hotel room,
hanging out,
goofing
yeah,
around.
and it's
Yeah. Asking about what did you eat for breakfast? I had some Cheerios. Like, that's on foot.
right.
Like that's
Right.
like you would expect that to be footage like in the 90s when like we first had cameras,
Right,
and you're
right,
like
yeah,
you film a bunch of
camcorder,
stuff.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
it's incredible.
Shannon Hoon.
I do want to give a shout out to our girl Linda Ronstadt. We did an episode on the Linda Ronstadt documentary, which is fabulous and like
Kind of a companion piece to this movie.
a companion
frankly.
piece. And you know, we're just we ride for Linda Ronstadt over here. So anytime we get her popping up, anytime we get her popping up in a rock doc, I feel like she's another person that just hasn't caught on in the same way. Like, I don't know, like one day everybody, like Kate Bush's song is in a, you know, in a show.
There's
going to
be someone on Twitter who's going to be like, "Oh, Linda Ronstadt was a problem. Did you see this?" Like as it like
Right.
as if they're discovering that Linda Ronstadt had a good voice.
Yeah, like
Be like a big Instagram thing.
Yeah, I feel like she's just not getting her flowers in the same way that some people
Yeah, I mean,
of her generation do. And
I
you
don't,
know,
I don't think it's in the cards for the Eagles or Linda. I mean, I think their sound and the songs are just a little too down the middle. They're great,
Yeah.
but like, you know what I mean?
I like the song.
Yeah,
Totally. Yeah. The song that she plays in that club gig that she's singing, Nightingale, it's on the Eagles' first album.
mm-hmm.
That's my favorite Eagles song. It's such a good song. I love it. I don't understand how it's not one of their bigger hits.
Is that Glenn Fry ballad?
So it's like it's got a little pep to it. It's like the same thing happened to everybody.
a little bit of a boogie.
Yeah, a little boogie to it. Yeah.
So good, little chugle, I would say.
Yeah, it's chugly. I would call it
the early
chugly.
the early Eagles had a little chugle to them, and they I think they smoothed off the chugle, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we haven't really talked a lot about you know, the original founding members. I mean, we haven't given Bernie his due. I don't think.
Brother of original Tom Petty band member Tom Leadon. I don't know.
Okay,
Mudcrutch guy or
He was in Mud. Tom Leadon was in Mudcrutch.
Are they Florida guys? The Leadons?
The Leadons are. I mean, they must be. I don't. They don't give the background of like how.
Love that.
Especially because Tom Leadon was like kicked out of. He was one of the guys that was pushed out of Mudcrutch for not being good enough. So
okay, because they met. Well, somehow I'm reading that he's early Bernie Leadon. Maybe not born, but he spent time before he became popular in San Diego, and that's how he met.
In San Diego. Oh yeah, they in Bay Park, right?
Right.
Yes. Tom Leadon. When I saw Mudcrutch, Tom Leadon mentioned living in Bay Park.
Being here in San Diego, we like cling to any connection to cool music from San Diego because it's
not a lot
for a very big city. Our musical output is, you know, a little lacking. Some may say.
You guys got some stuff.
Yeah. So Bernie,
Pinback, come on.
Yeah.
Sure.
Pinback.
Yeah,
Love Pinback.
Please. We got a few. We got Rocket from the Crypt.
Yeah.
A few we can hang our hat on.
I was just at a convoy show on Saturday.
Yeah.
Nice.
So anyway, Bernie Leadon, you know, I don't know. How would you guys describe how he comes off in his interviews, contemporary interviews in the doc?
I love him.
Oh, great. Really reflective and like really down to earth and like he's really given things a lot of thought. I saw a photo. I mean, this is a sort of stereotypical, I guess, but I saw a photo of him when he started playing a few gigs with them in like the late 2010s. He rejoined the tour.
Oh, he did
again. Around the time of this doc.
Yeah, after this doc, him and Glenn Fry had not spoken since the beer incident. And then after this movie came out, because of seeing each other talk about the incident in the movie, they rekindled, and Bernie rejoined the band.
Wow.
For a few years.
And would Bernie play, like, he would just come out for a few songs and play the early stuff, or would he be in there the whole time with Joe? Like, it was like 4 guitars? Wait, it was Glenn?
Felder was already gone.
Felder was
gone.
So Bernie filled in.
So
I like that for Bernie.
Yeah,
he made some money.
Yeah, great. Yeah. But I saw a photo of him in one of those shows, and he's wearing a shirt that just says sober.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that because he speaks like the type of person who is reflective in a way that like people who've gone through recovery often are.
Mhm.
Like very,
Recovery
very,
speak.
yeah, very, I mean, not even recovery speak as much as just like conscious of all that has happened
Mhm.
and has given it a lot of thought, you know.
Okay.
But I love. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I
mean, he
love.
comes off
I
great.
love Bernie's resume. I mean, he in Dillard and Clark. He was. I think he played on that stuff, or maybe he was definitely in the Burrito
He wrote
Brothers.
an art he wrote a song with Gene Clark for sure. He's co-written some songs with them. I don't know if it was Gene Clark stuff that he played with the Burrito Brothers or did with Dillard Clark.
Yeah,
And
but
then
he, you know,
he wrote that song "My
And he
Man,"
was
which is on the
yeah.
border. It's after Graham Parsons had died.
Right. Well, it's
yeah.
a great song actually too.
I once knew a man, a really talented guy.
Yeah.
My
Uh,
man's got
um,
it made. Like my man is very. It's it's kind of a little bit cloying, a little corny, but it's touching. Writing this song for your ex bandmate, and it's very beautiful. It's almost
Yeah.
like has like a kind of almost like a kind of a church music feel. The like the way those harmonies come in. Um,
Yeah.
so I love Bernie.
I mean, I can, it's easy for me to say, but I do question his judgment around his reasons for exiting the band. It's like, look, man, you're in a really popular band right now. Like, just ride it out. You don't need to decide to leave this band just because they're gonna,
they want to
you
rock
know, they want to
8%
rock a
harder
little
than
bit,
you
eight
than you
or
do.
like,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. That's not
like,
like it's not like they
yeah,
were like turning into like some like thrash metal band. They were just like
yeah, like Black
Right.
Sabbath. It's like they were always the Eagles.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's
"N-
Well, I do want to say though, I mean, what the most famous kiss off line in rock docs history has got to be when George Harrison says, "See you around the clubs and
see
get
around the
back."
clubs. Yeah,
Love that. Um, to me, Bernie Leadon just leaving the recording studio is to say, "I think I'm going surfing."
yeah.
yeah, it's great.
Like, they're all like listening to playback of a song. They've worked all night. It's dawn. They're in the studio. They're all discussing it, and then Bernie doesn't say a word. And somebody turns to him and says, "Well, what do you think?" He said, "I think I'm going surfing," and just
It's
walks
great.
out.
That's the end.
It's a good
That to
line.
me is ice cold. Love it.
Yeah,
It's
I think
classic.
Bernie.
It's guys in their 20s. It's the narcissism of small differences. It's
Sure.
it's everyone's got an ego. Glenn and Don. Again, you're picturing guys in their 20s who are
Yeah.
at this point very famous and wealthy, and
And coked out of their minds.
and playing in a band is hard when the stakes are low. Sometimes, you know what I mean. Like I can understand it. Him just being like, I like country music and bluegrass, and that's what I'm interested in. And I mean, and honestly, Glenn's best stuff is his country rock stuff. Lion Eyes, Tequila
Yeah.
Sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best Glenn Fry stuff. Glenn's '80s material, it's pretty terrible. And like, oh,
Yeah, it's
Wait a
not for
minute.
me.
Hold
New
on.
Kid on
Hold on.
Town
Hold on.
on the Hotel California record is great. And then again, when Glenn would write like a country ballad, it was awesome. But he always was just like, I'm a Detroit rock city kind of guy. Like, I want to like play a Chuck
Yeah.
Berry riff and like, I'm already gone. Like, it's I have to I kind of side with Bernie where I'm just like, yeah, dude, when Glenn wants to rock out, it's lame. And Glenn Johns had the same take. When the Eagles try to really
Yeah.
rock
It's just like
out, it's lame, and that's why the dude didn't like them. The dude loved
yeah.
Creedence and he loved Bob Dylan, not because they rock. I mean, Creedence rocked. Creedence had like a true chugel. They had a true groove.
Yeah.
Eagles
They
couldn't.
weren't trying to rock harder than that groove
No,
allowed.
Eagles couldn't rock. Um,
Yeah.
so I kind of side with Glenn and Bernie, and so anyway, that's my Bernie take.
I think
I'm gonna
yeah.
ride for "You Belong to the City" in the '80s, which is not trying to rock.
I
But
do like
I
You
do
Belong to
like
the
that.
City.
I
I
do
do like
like
that
that
song.
when when he went solo, what he did was he said, "I'm from Detroit. What do we not have in the Eagles? Saxophone.
Right.
Doing that." and I love it. He's got a lot of saxophone on that 80s stuff that he did, and
Yeah.
I think it kind of works. I'm a fan. I'm just gonna ride for that. Okay, putting that aside.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think, the Bernie era is my favorite era of the Eagles. Those are the albums I actually listen to from time to time. So I'm with you. I'm with you and Glenn on that one. But I do want to move us to another just masterful piece of filmmaking is when they begin with Glenn in Detroit and Don in Texas.
Oh yeah.
It's such good storytelling, because in the way that they're telling us their story, we've just started the movie. They're introducing us to who Glenn is. They're introducing us to who Don is. They both come from pretty humble roots, but at the same time, they're also situating the music in like the history of American music.
They tell us that Glenn's mother baked pies at General Motors.
Yeah,
they don't say
right.
she was a cook at General Motors. She
Yeah.
baked pies. That's so
like,
good. Love
yeah,
that.
Specific job.
We've got like a subsistence.
Like I
Yeah.
can taste the General Motors pie.
It is a
Right.
specific job.
Exterior,
It's very, very much the 1950s capitalism. Like we have a pie baker at our car
Assembly
plant.
line.
Mrs. Fry.
Yep.
At our assembly line. Yeah, excuse me.
Cracking 'em up.
But so, like we get that Glenn starts in Motown. Don is starting in this Dixieland. He's picking up the music from there. There's our roots. There's our roots for where we're about to go. And it carries us all the way up until Glenn has a chance encounter with Detroit music man Bob Seger as a young
high school rocker.
What was the term from Time Crisis? Young and youthful manhood, or
Youth and young manhood. Or
youth and young manhood.
Oh
was
right,
that
yeah,
episode
yeah.
You guys did.
That's the Kings of Leon album.
Yeah.
Youth and young manhood. So we get all the way up until Bob Seger, and then on a parallel track we have Don doing the same all the way up through having the same chance encounter with Kenny Rogers, both of which essentially take them to LA where their paths cross. It's just like I mean, so many movies have the like, okay, let's start at the beginning. I remember the first time I saw Elvis Presley on TV, and we do that here too. But it's the absolute best version of how you handle that material.
No, and it's you're right. It's a coherent through line of like Glenn always is going to be more of a rock guy, and then Don, or I guess the Eagles are a combination of like country music and contemporary rock music, and Don coming from Texas and Glenn coming from Michigan, they marry that. I mean the origins are so you knowing that what they are going to become, this like global behemoth of rock music, and it's like the early, especially the early Henley stuff is just like they're just like basically like his grandfather seemed like basically like a subsistence farmer, like a dirt farmer,
farmer.
Depression era, like just like it just seems so improbable, like it just seemed like the Dust Bowl or something, like just like truly like John Steinbeck, like old weird America that Don was born into. And then like it's just like it's just like a great crystallization of that like trajectory that a lot of these guys from that era experience of like born in the 40s, and then the America that they emerge in the 1970s is like completely different. Like the America from the 40s to the 70s, you couldn't, like the changes in those 30 years is just so profound that to picture what they would end up in when they were born is just it's impossible.
And you can see how they connect with like Dylan, again, like born in a way out of the way place,
sure,
and just through force of will and everything else made him like made himself into what he became. I do like the fact that the movie doesn't even bother to give the other guys in the band any backstory at all. Like, Randy Meisner just landed on a stage in LA with a bass in his hand straight out of the sky.
Yeah.
And nobody has to ask any questions. Like, maybe he's got a story, whatever, but it doesn't work in the movie, and it's
too
not
long.
helping the movie.
Yeah.
And who cares?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, even Joe,
so many documentaries we have to get that.
But like,
I mean, all they say about Joe is they're like, we all liked the James Gang.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
they just trust that you know what that means.
Well, this
You
is
know,
a sly dig. This is a sly dig that I picked up this time. Joe
Okay.
Walsh is like a year older than Glenn Fry,
Yeah.
and he's from
Right.
Detroit. And so he's like,
Oh, really?
and so at one point, when Glenn Fry is,
No, Joe's from Cleveland.
right, but but he was playing around like the Midwest, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sorry, he's playing around the Midwest, and when Azoff plays, like, tries to get Joe Walsh into the band, basically suggests it. When they're talking that story, Glenn Fry says, "Oh yeah, I remember listening to the James Gang back when I was a kid in Detroit." Like,
I was confused by that.
such a sly.
Yeah.
I remember that.
It is confusing.
I caught that too. I was
Maybe
like,
it means he was 17 and Joe Walsh is 18. You know what I mean? But at that time, it makes a big difference.
right.
You know, a guy who's a year ahead of you on this thing is your senior. You know, and
But was the James
it was
Gang
just like
it is.
putting out records in like 1967 or something? Like,
I think they were just touring.
okay.
I don't know when their
They-
first record, maybe
they-
69, but I think they were just touring around the Midwest.
And yeah, very regional tours. They like I remember from Joe Walsh when he was on Marin.
Mhm.
He talked about the Who came through and did like a Midwest tour and picked up like when it was like their first time in the US, and they picked up regional bands as their regional opener in each area, and that's where James Gang ended up, and that's how he ended up being buddies with Keith Moon.
Oh, right. There was all that like hotel Joe and Keith trashing
So that's
hotel rooms, right?
Right.
So yeah, so that was, but I mean, Joe is the one, if you're gonna do another story, because like I don't even like Joe Walsh had like a 3-year-old daughter who has died in a car accident on her way to like nursery school, and then like him and his wife got in an accident because he couldn't forgive his wife for being the driver of the car, and that was like when he was in the James Gang. Like he has like a really
Heavy.
deep and interesting story that begins like right at the beginning of his fame.
But again,
like
the choice
the
to
James
leave
Gang
that
were
out,
big,
Yeah.
and the James Gang were
Sure.
big, you know.
but the choice to leave that out is like because of story efficiency. It's almost like song power, right? It's almost like the Eagles. You know,
Yeah.
if it didn't fit the song, it wasn't going in the song. And
Right.
the documentary kind of has that. You know, like all this stuff about Joe Walsh's backstory is interesting, and he could have his own documentary, and that would be fascinating. And he's got a lot of stories to tell and things to share. But that's not the story we're telling, and we're not going to get distracted. And so
As
many
Joe
documentaries
says,
get distracted.
It's not best for the Eagles. It's not best for the movie. Yeah.
All right. There's so many things to say. I want to talk. We
Well,
got to.
I want to say real quick, the movie does an incredible job of playing other people's music. Like there is, they intersperse. You know, we get a lot of the Eagles music in here, but on their way to like telling their story of how they rise up through LA when they're there, plus what their influences are coming up. Like, I just don't know that you would think if you were going to watch an Eagles documentary that you would hear Beatles, Elvis, Seeger, Kenny Rogers, Jackson Brown, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Carole King, James Taylor, Elton John, Linda Ronstadt, Dillard and Clark, Flying Burrito Brothers, Chris Hillman, Poco, Stones, Zeppelin, CSNY, Mamas and Papas, Roy Orbison, like The Who. You know, like, and you get like 8 seconds of like all of those musicians in the first hour and a half of the movie.
Right. I mean, there's money there. Like, right.
And there's
when you have the money and you have all the people behind it, you can tell this story in a way that like a lot of the like less well-financed documentaries that have a lot to recommend for themselves. Like, at least if you have the capital and you have the ability to like, yeah, we're going to get approval from Joni Mitchell. She's going to sign off. Like, if you've got that, make it, make it count. And they do.
Yeah, I love all the scenes from the Troubadour. They're awesome. In fact, that movie I did not like, the Rocket Man, when they say Glenn Fry says that he was at that show, Elton John's very first show in the US.
Everyone was
Troubadour.
at that show.
Yeah. I was hoping to see a clip of Henley